Thank you very much, Annie. And hello, everyone, and thanks for coming today. I will go ahead and start sharing screen. Okay. So empathizing, let's see if I can get that. There we go. Empathizing to enrich your WAC program design. I want to just begin by talking about where I learned about design thinking, which is where this idea about empathizing comes from. So I learned about design thinking from my first supervisor as a WAC director at Cal State Fullerton, which is where I still am. My first supervisor suggested that I read this really great book. It's called Creative Confidence, and it's by two brothers, Tom and David Kelly. And I've cited the book at the end of my list, so you can see it there. But they have a really engaging, accessible text about design thinking, which they brought from where it started, which I would say is maybe engineering and architecture, these kinds of fields. They brought it into the business world. And from there, it has been brought into other fields as well, such as writing studies. So the workshop today, my plan is to first define design thinking, and then to explain that framework's usefulness at Cal State Fullerton, where I still lead the Writing Across the Curriculum program. And then that should take about 25, 30 minutes, and that will leave us half an hour to first brainstorm ways that we might use this empathizing step in our own programs, and then to give each other feedback about what we're thinking. So, what is design thinking? As I said, it started in the 50s or 60s with fields like architecture and engineering, and then it slowly trickled down into other fields. It's a multi-step, non-linear, iterative process for coming up with new solutions to really difficult problems, complex problems that have, say, multiple solutions. For instance, how to teach someone how to write. Right? Many ways to approach it. None of them is the only one that works. So design thinking is kind of perfect for writing and writing studies. And as I mentioned, I do use Stanford's D.school, their ideas about design thinking. And I need to clarify that because there are some other programs that have slightly tweaked it and made it their own. So this is just an overview of the steps in Stanford's design thinking process. The first step is to empathize, and these are all their words. So if any of them seem corny, don't blame me. Okay? So you first need to empathize, which is studying and observing your program's users, or I like WAC's word better, stakeholders, at all the different levels. Once you've empathized and listened to other people, you can then define the problem that you want to address. Your next step is to ideate, which just means to generate many ideas and solutions, possible solutions to the problem you're addressing. Next, you would build or model some prototypes to the ideated solutions you've come up with. Next, you test some of the models, decide which one to use, and then revise and repeat, right? So it's an ongoing process. Perhaps you noticed as I was reading that this sounded a lot like the writing process. And if it did, good, because this is something that writing studies scholars have noticed as well. So here I've just quickly, in parentheses, I've got the D.school's steps here. We have analyzing audiences and empathy. We have defining a problem, generating ideas, drafting as a prototype, getting a peer review as a test, and then revising. So revise and repeat. So it's a really similar process. So this is just a page of previous studies of design thinking and its ties to writing studies and WAC. We have Charles Kostelnick and James Purdy. I keep having this little screen here. There we go, put it at the bottom, who trace parallels between the two fields, and they argue for design thinking's usefulness in writing studies. Richard Marback and Carrie Leverenz have argued that design thinking can help solve those wicked problems that are defined as problems that have multiple solutions and really complex contexts, maybe changing contexts, so you can never find just this single best answer. And then Jenna Pack-Sheffield, who has extended design thinking's framework to WAC program design. So my focus here is on the first step, empathizing. And the reason I'm focusing on this is that in my experience, what I've noticed is that sometimes because we're experts and we've worked in these fields for a while, we may work with other faculty, talk with administrators about a student problem, and then we think we've hit upon a great solution. Maybe we talk with people at other institutions and we're getting all these ideas, and we think, and we assume, not consciously, that it's going to be a good idea because other people have tried it or because we came up with it and we're experts, right? But I think what design thinking does for me is it helps me step away from the assumptions. It helps me tell myself, you shouldn't even start this until you talk to the stakeholders, until you talk to the users. So reaching out directly to students and faculty can expose unexpected needs you had not thought about, and also suggest novel solutions for your WAC program. So the power of iterative empathizing. The Kelly brothers urge us to view, quote, experiences through another person's eyes, to recognize why people do what they do. For instance, we might observe and ask questions as our users or stakeholders work. How many of us have done that, right? Watch your students try to do something and ask them questions about what they're doing as they do it. Or faculty. Listen to them in open conversations. So maybe now you're asking, how does this differ from studying our audience like we do in the writing process? For me, it does differ a little bit. For me, when I'm thinking about studying an audience, or when I'm teaching my students to study their audience before they start writing, I'm asking them to do some research. I'm asking them to Google an audience, or look at their CVs, or look at their web pages, look at things they've published, and so on. This is a little more intimate. So design thinking asks you to empathize more directly. So as I mentioned, this kind of listening to people, talking to them, surveying them, having focus groups, and even watching them work and asking questions as they do so. In addition, this framework encourages a continuous and deeper attention to others' needs. It's iterative, so you don't just create a new program in WAC and then say it's done and walk away from it. You keep watching the students, or you keep watching the faculty, you keep asking them questions, and you refine your program as you go. So that's the background of design thinking. Now I'm going to talk about how I applied it at Cal State Fullerton. So you might want, if you don't know already, Fullerton is located about 7 miles northeast of Disneyland in Southern California. We are an Hispanic serving institution, and we were ranked number 4 in the nation for awarding bachelor's degrees to Hispanic students. This is some of our fall 2020 data about students. You can see that we're a really big campus. We have over 41,000 students back in fall 2020. You can see that they're mostly undergrads, they're mostly full-time. And you can also see that we have very large numbers of underrepresented groups, Hispanic students. Almost 60% of our students receive financial aid. 31% of them are first gen. And then this is an important number too, this average age of 23.7. I think this is telling for the things I heard from the students when I actually listened to them, the kinds of services that they would need. So how did I empathize? What were the actual steps that I took? So first, I'm going to call this my listening tour. Following the advice of WAC scholars, I, of course, talked to administrators and other faculty, interviewed them about what they saw as writing needs at Cal State Fullerton. And what I learned pretty quickly is that at Fullerton, we do have some support for undergrads with writing, but it's kind of exclusive. It's not really intended for grad students. So for instance, we have a university learning center that helps students in GE classes and the GE writing requirement. We also have a writing center, and that is focused on first-year writing. So those discoveries led me to wonder how I might support WAC, support grad students with WAC. Phase 2 of the listening tour found me collaborating with librarians, and specifically with librarian Jay Tian. We are the two who held focus groups for faculty and administrators. The focus group just included a simple survey so that we would have some writing to take back with us after the focus group, plus some open-ended questions where faculty and administrators felt free to talk about their grad students and what they thought were their grad students' challenges. We learned that at Cal State Fullerton, many grad students did not meet their department's expected graduation timeframes, and also that many of them didn't finish their projects at all. So those conversations helped us get to step 2 in design thinking, the definition. So we defined our problem. How can the WAC program help Cal State Fullerton grad students finish their theses in a timely way? Step 3 of our listening tour. Now we had a definition, and we could start on a third round of empathizing by listening to the actual grad students. So we heard in those focus groups that grad students who had exceeded their department's timeframes were shunted into a class called Grad Studies 700. The class doesn't do anything. They don't have any meetings. There's no course content. There's nothing there. It's just a placeholder to keep the students enrolled in their grad degrees. So we emailed those students a 10-question survey in spring 2019. 30 students responded to our survey, which was a lower number than we wanted, of course, but we still were able to get a lot of information about our students from these 30 and apply it to our design for serving those students. I also thought it was interesting that 26% of our survey respondents had been in Grad Studies 700 for more than 4 semesters. So you can imagine, I mean, what is that? That's 2 years, right, for a master's, 2 years beyond the master's. And I just thought about those students and how there's no course content in that GS 700. And I wondered, what are they doing? So the survey helped me find out more about those students. So the student needs. First, we knew from the survey that the students needed guidance for using different disciplinary genres. So like most grad programs, Cal State Fullerton's grad programs asks for a variety of genres, common genres, review of the lit, an abstract, a proposal, and so on. But the students reported that they didn't know how to approach these genres and that they weren't really getting guidance about these genres. We also asked students about what they thought were the biggest obstacles to their graduating on time, and these were their results. 60% of them said time management, that they didn't know how to handle a long-term project, how to pace it, basically. 57% said writer's block or anxiety stopped them. 53% said they had too much independence, that there was no kind of time frame set out for them once they were in this 700 level class, that there was no accountability, and this was a big problem for them. Too much freedom. 30% of them said they had difficulty understanding the research resources that they were finding. 23% of them had trouble finding appropriate resources. And another 23% of them said that applying and understanding their advisor's advice and feedback was difficult for them and caused some problems. I called this slide the other obstacles because they came from kind of a category we might think of as other, kind of not traditionally academic problems. But at our institution, these are really common obstacles. So working to support themselves and their families, many of the students said that they had to have full-time jobs and that this held them back from finishing on time. They also talked about faculty obstacles, 17% of them did. They talked about a lack of or delayed feedback on their writing. And those of you who are grad students or you remember grad school, you know that if you have delayed feedback, this might stop you from meeting one of the university's deadlines for something, right? For filing something. So that too can cause a problem. And even difficulty making a committee. So they get accepted to the program, but then they go door to door asking people to please be on their committee. And at Cal State Fullerton, the faculty teach so much and they have so many grad students that sometimes it's very hard for somebody to make a committee. And then family and personal challenges constituted 13% of students' obstacles. So at this point, so we had heard from focus groups and students, we had heard that what we should do, what writing across the curriculum should do is hire editors for the theses, for the students. But Jay and I didn't really think that that sounded like writing across the curriculum, that we would just hire somebody to edit the students' writing. We wanted to support them along the way, not just at the end. So we asked this question: if writing across the curriculum created thesis retreats where you would have support for your writing, what kinds of support would be most desired? 73% of them said research and writing consultations would be helpful. 57% of them said they would like specialized writing workshops, like about genres or conventions of different disciplinary writing. 50% of them said they would like to see time management workshops. 47% of them wanted goal setting help. And 37% of them mentioned student writing groups might be helpful. All right, so the next step is to turn empathy into action. So we did decide that a thesis retreat program could address some of the students' needs, supporting along the way. And because Jay and I wanted to collaborate, we thought this will be great. We can get our faculty development center, our library, and our WAC program all on board trying to help students. So the retreats began before COVID, a few months before COVID, in person at our Pollock Library. So what we did was we reserved a few rooms. We invited students to come, and again, returning to empathy, we knew that we wanted to provide food because some of our students are food insecure. We knew that we wanted to provide loaner laptops because, again, not all of our students have laptops. So we were really trying to key into the empathizing here. And then, of course, COVID moved the retreats onto Zoom. And at that point, I became sort of a Zoom switchboard operator, moving people into breakout sessions so that they could meet with writing consultants and so on. And also a thesis and COVID cheerleader, trying to, as the students came into the main Zoom room, trying to inspire them, motivate them, and keep them excited about their projects. So this page is going to show you, this slide is going to show you some of the ways that Jay and I tried to address some of our students' expressed needs. And you remember that this design thinking process is iterative, right? We can keep coming back. We can keep adding bits. as we move along. But in the first year, our primary goal was those two really high percentages. One of them was research and writing consultations. And the way we addressed this is we engaged 2 librarians and a writing consultant. I put in parentheses here how we supported those people, because just in case somebody is interested in creating a thesis retreat. If you want free librarians, the way to do this is you go to the dean of the library and you ask the dean, you tell the dean about the writing retreats, and you ask if you can have librarians at the retreats. And our particular dean said, this sounds like a great idea. I want to do it. And because I want to do it, I'm going to make it okay contractually for the librarians to work with you on once a month on Fridays. So that's how we got free service there. And then the writing consultant is a part-time lecturer from the English department. We started with students because I personally think having students in there would be fantastic. It would be a great opportunity for the students from the Writing Center to get this kind of tutoring experience. But eventually, I think because of COVID and Zoom, the Writing Center tutors became overwhelmed and they didn't volunteer to do this. So we hired a writing consultant from the English department. And both of those appointments were 30 minutes each. The first year, we also offered specialized workshops, which were hybrid faculty-led workshops. These were stipended by the WAC program. And topics included things like synthesizing your sources, time management, and thesis formatting. In the second year, I wanted to address students' desire for some goal-setting help. I'm still working on this one. I want to find someone at Fullerton who's an expert in helping others set realistic, manageable goals. We had someone like that and she retired during COVID, so I have to find another person. But what I did is I thought, well, at least I can get them thinking about their goals and trying to set a goal. So I created a goal setting and celebrating sheet. It's a Google document. It's quite simple. They put their initials in the first column. The second column says, write 1 to 3 measurable and realistic goals for the day. And I give them some examples of those kinds of goals. The next column says, what did you achieve today? So you build in that kind of reflection, asking students to reflect on what they did. And then the last column said, what do you want to do next? So that students can park on the downhill slope, right? There's that book, Writing Your Dissertation in 15 Minutes a Day, that recommends parking on the downhill slope so that you don't forget where you left off. Now, this was really handy. It taught me a couple of things. It taught me that my students don't know how to make goals, realistic goals. We'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But it also gave me this bonus of assessment data. So I was able to, in my end of the year assessment report, I can't remember the exact number, but it was very high. It was something like 97% of students who came to thesis retreats met one or more of the goals that they had set for themselves on this day. So that was really handy to have that assessment data. Students also expressed a desire for student writing groups. What I did here was I created breakout sessions in the Zoom room. One of them was a quiet writing cafe. That's where we started. We started with a quiet writing cafe where students were just going to kind of feel like they had some kind of solidarity and maybe hear each other, clicking on their keyboards. And some of the students, about half of those students said, because of COVID, I feel really isolated and I wish I could talk to the other people in this room. So the next retreat, I added a workshopping writing cafe where students were free to come in and talk to each other. And most of them just wanted to talk about the difficulties, the challenges of writing a thesis in lockdown. So that was kind of a nice support space for them. And now we move into the continuous empathizing. How do we continue? You've already seen me doing a little bit of that with year 1 and year 2, kind of just continuing to listen. I give post-retreat surveys, and I use that goal setting sheet. And what I learned from these documents, one, my students need more help setting reasonable goals. I honestly had students who were writing in that first column, what are your, name 1 to 3 measurable, reasonable goals for today. I honestly had students who would say, I'm going to find all of the sources for my 3rd chapter, or I'm going to write my 3rd chapter, the entire thing, right, in a day. So they weren't thinking about the possibility of maybe I can just write the introduction today, or maybe I can write about 2 of my sources today. So they were just going huge, which I think can be really defeating and disheartening. So I still want to find an expert, somebody who knows how to teach students how to do that. The students still want more discipline-specific workshops. So we have workshops in writing in the humanities and writing in the sciences. And I will continue reaching out to our other colleges, engineering, education, and so on. But at this point, we don't have those workshops. So we're still building. And students want more genre and skill-specific workshops. So those about synthesizing, for instance, or we have a really popular one about a data management tool called SPSS. And that one is really, really popular. The students also expressed a desire for, we currently just do retreats once a month because that's what we have the funding for. And the students have said, wouldn't it be great if we could come, twice a month or every week? And that would be, I would love that, but it would, multiply the money that we would need to be paying the faculty who are offering the little workshops and the writing consultant and so on. So as we grow, maybe we can increase slowly. All right, so at this point, I'm going to give you a chance to create your own empathy outline on a Padlet that I have created. And Annie said she would put that link into our chat. So let's see. I'll get into the Zoom. Stop the share. Okay, so do we have that in the chat? Can everybody see that? Okay, so I'm going to share again and show you the Padlet. Can everybody see a bright green screen? Okay, good. All right, so this is the Padlet that I created. And I ask you, how can you add empathizing to the next program you design, or maybe something you have in mind right now, some small addition to your WAC program? And I've got some steps here. It's just, I'm going to give you 10 minutes for step 1 and 2, where you can briefly describe the program that you'd like to create. Step 2 is to brainstorm a list of ways you might empathize with your audience and users. And I did post my PowerPoint on the Whova page. And I can go back to number 18 of my slides. I gave some ideas for asking questions about how you might brainstorm there. So I'll give 10 minutes for that. And when we come back, you can see at the bottom of this, there's a place for adding a comment. So I thought what we might do is each of us randomly choose 3 little Padlets to add a comment to. Maybe ask a question, suggest something else, a different way to empathize, or maybe you've done this before, and so you can provide a suggestion. So go ahead and take 10 minutes. Do you see this little plus sign down here? You just click on that plus and a little white box will come up for you. And please put your name in the top space. So go ahead, 10 minutes, and we'll come back. So we've got about a minute left. So maybe finish up whatever step or sentence you're working on. Okay, so at this point, what I'd like you to do is just scroll on your Padlet sheet and give comments to 2 or 3 people who've posted here. Maybe you have other suggestions, maybe you've tried something on your campus, or maybe you have a question. So go ahead and take 5 or 10 minutes, probably closer to 10 if you're doing it with a few of these Padlets. And then we'll leave the rest of the time for questions. We'll call it 8 minutes. Okay, so go ahead and finish up the comment that you're making right now. Okay, so now we have, I think, about 10 minutes just to ask questions and have a conversation about what you wrote on the Padlet. I find that when I write on these little Padlets, I come up with all kinds of things that I want to talk about. So I'll just open this up to questions. I liked reading what you all were thinking about trying. And Joyce, that psychology conversation, it's so resonant with what we're doing at Fullerton. Our psychology department just asked our English department to kind of tweak our general advanced writing course so that it covered more science writing. So you're absolutely right. I need to go back to the psychology department and say, how is this working for you? Let's talk, right? I need to get some feedback on that. So thanks for that. So any questions or comments? Sarah.
I guess just briefly, and this is useless, but I'm just realizing how much time like good process takes, right? Like if like you might want to meet with people, but before you do that, ideally you'd survey them for like where they're at.
Yes.
Like, if we had all the time and they had all the time, but totally like laying the groundwork in advance is going to pay off. Totally.
Yes, I totally agree. And another thing that I've learned, I don't know what your universities are like, but Cal State Fullerton is kind of notoriously slow. Things just move very, very slowly. And as WAC professionals, I think most of us, we're very creative. We want to get things off the ground and just, okay, let's do it. I have the idea, let's do it right now. And so I think one thing that's kind of nice is Sarah, if you can think about, okay, this doesn't have to happen in September, right? Maybe I can send the survey to these faculty, give them a while to answer it, and then schedule the meeting for, I don't know, November, December, and then maybe we can continue working on it in the spring, because the reality is that lots of your colleagues, they won't do it in a big hurry. So I think that's something that takes some pressure off of me sometimes. I think I just want to go and get it done. But if I tell myself, nobody else is going to rush through this. So maybe you can just, spread it out so that it's not so much of a time crunch for you or for them. Yeah, thanks for that.
So Leslie, hi, this is Kay, everyone. I just wanted to thank you so much for the framework that you gave us and the questions to prompt our thinking about this. I was really taken by, especially early on when you aligned that Stanford d.school, like with the writing process, and now you've taken it into, so really about like institutional engagement, like how we think about the work we do situated within the institutions and the institutional contexts where we find ourselves. And so that notion of pulling in the concept of audience and users and so forth really resonated with me. So thank you so much.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I found when my supervisor suggested this book and I was reading it, I thought, this is amazing. You know the writing process, but you probably haven't applied it to when you're trying to create something new. Like the Padlet that I created was about an assessment strategy that I want to try out. And I can assure you that's not going to happen in a hurry, because I'm going to have to get department volunteers, right? Departments who want to find out more about their writing intensive classes. So I just need to go slow, but also I'm just the kind of person who, if I have a framework, I know I'll be more methodical and I'll be more thoughtful about the stakeholders that I'm trying to help.
Well, and so that reminds me of the anecdote you told us about the graduate students who, when you asked them to articulate what their individual goals were for a short writing period, they went, big.
Yes.
And what you're saying then, and what I'm seeing is now you're thinking about it, in terms of stages over time, and processes over time. And it actually reminds me of the session I just was in before this with Elizabeth Wardle, and her comments in particular in her session about the work that she's doing in creating, workshops and extended opportunities and so forth, and all of the thinking that went into the work that she was doing. It seems to really align nicely with what you're talking about as well.
Yeah, thanks, Kay. Thank you.
This is kind of an off the wall group to think of in this context, but when you keep saying the goals, when I think of people setting goals, I think of coaches and athletics, and that group is particularly with the Olympics going on now too, that they're especially good at figuring out how to set goals and get people to those goals and setting realistic goals, honestly. So in some ways I'd want to pick the brain of one of the coaches on campus and find out what they do with their athletes to set those kind of goals.
What a great idea, Lauren. Yeah, I could reach out to our, I guess it would be health and human development, where we have kinesiology and other places. Maybe I think that's a great idea, to reach out to people who want to be coaches and who are studying how to coach. That might be a good idea. And also maybe the education college, maybe they know how to, they have someone who specializes in teaching people to break things into chunks. It's not an easy thing to do, right? To break up. It's like when you're writing your dissertation or a book, how much do I want to get done each semester? What's realistic to get done in a semester? But thanks for that suggestion. That's a great idea.
It makes me think too, I had this moment of realizing, I wonder how many, I'm thinking first year writing, because that's what I teach, that I feel like we are teaching them how to break something down into steps, but I don't know if they transfer that ever out of first year writing. Realizing that same process works with other projects.
Yes. Yeah, right. But transfer doesn't always happen, right? So.
And transfer doesn't always happen for faculty either. I'm just so grateful for this session, Leslie.
Oh,
so practical, because I created the writing and psychology course, and in my head, very simple for them to take onto Canvas. When we had the COVID, it was no big deal. They just switched right into Zoom, and in my head, everything made perfect sense. But I don't know that.
Right.
So this has been really, really helpful for me. So thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome, Joyce. I do the same thing. You've studied this for however many years. And so when somebody presents you with a problem, your impulse is, I'm going to solve that problem for you right now. I know how to do that. And then you create something. That's my impulse too. But this whole framework made me say, wait, I have to slow down and maybe talk to those other people, because there are probably things that I'm not thinking about, right? I'm not thinking about the students who have children and they're working full-time jobs and trying to write a thesis, right? Because I didn't have a child when I was working on my dissertation, right? So yeah, it's really great to kind of step back. And so thanks for coming, Joyce.
No, thank you.
Well, thanks so much, everyone, for coming. I really, really appreciate it. And thanks so much. And I assume my email is available on the webpage, but if it's not, it's just lbruce@fullerton.edu. So if you have questions later, feel free to email me them. I'd love to hear from you.